Nymphomaniac is a 2013 film written and directed by Lars von Trier. Jo, a sex addict, is found beaten in an alley. A man, Seligman, takes pity on her and offers her a place to rest. Jo recounts her life story to him, beginning with her sexual awakening as a child to her life spiraling out of control. Seligman offers symbolic explanations to Jo's narrative and acts as an observer concerned with forgiving Jo's alleged misdeeds. Jo acts as an avatar for the director, explicitly stating her philosophies and worldview in a manner that is unambiguous to the audience. More on that later. Jo's life story, divided into 8 chapters in the film, is primarily concerned with her sexual habits and views on romance. She believes love is merely sex plus jealousy. Nevertheless, she finds herself in serious romantic relationships from time to time. Once with a man who, when she was a teenager, took her virginity. She seeks out his affection later in life, in spite of the fact that he treats her badly, or perhaps because of it. In her middle age, she falls for and has sex with a 15-year-old girl. Again, more on that later. As the film concludes, Seligman, who up to that point claimed to be asexual, attempts to rape Jo. Von Trier was inspired to make this 5-hour-plus film full of graphic sex and philosophical deviations after reading Marcel Proust's massive work In Search of Lost Time. It is probably not a coincidence that Proust's work was in 7 volumes, exactly one less than the 8 chapters in which Lars von Trier has divided his work, perhaps as an attempt to outdo Proust. Both works, superficially, involve a great amount of sex, but both purport to be the stuff of grander ideas. In Nymphomaniac, the theme that flows throughout all the chapters, and the various interludes in the small home with Jo and her new friend, is the concept of what Lars von Trier, at least, believes is empathy. Every experience, every moment is filtered through the subjective imagination of who is experiencing it. In Nymphomaniac, that individual is Jo. We hear her story, but there are several times in which the story becomes either impossible or at least improbable, and Jo and Seligman both acknowledge this. The film takes place in a kind of geographical no man's land, with only a few glances at currency telling us where this might be. It does not matter because really this narrative exists primarily in the memories of Jo more than any physical space. Nymphomaniac is a conversation between a woman trying to explain herself and an intellectual who keeps interrupting her with mythological references, religious imagery, and analogies, trying to fit everything she says into something he can analyze and thus understand. Nymphomaniac is the director's passive-aggressive insult about the relationship between an artist and a critic. Since the character of Seligman explicitly tells the audience what every bit of symbolism in the film is meant to be, I won't play this particular game and instead focus on other matters. There is no point in just recounting the dialogue of the film, word for word. In some circles of film criticism, there is a belief in separating the art from the artist, as if a film is simply conjured into being by some abstract personification of art rather than carefully formed by human hands. It is admittedly not without merit. However, many directors, the so-called auteur directors who wish to control every aspect of production, leave a lot of themselves on the celluloid. The films are personal, each one in varying degrees. Lars von Trier's films certainly fit this qualification of being personal. The 3 films, Antichrist, Melancholia, and Nymphomaniac, are called the Depression Trilogy, a reference to the director's mental health. The director is battling his personal demons through his films and showcasing his beliefs, his philosophies, his politics, and his inner struggle throughout these films. So I assert that it is not only acceptable, but necessary to view Nymphomaniac through the lens of the director himself. Frankly, he makes it difficult not to. Jo serves as his avatar in the film, someone who espouses his view of the world. Jo is not simply a character. In her conversations with Seligman, she regurgitates a worldview that Lars von Trier declares himself either in his previous films or his public life. Jo's conversation with Seligman about what actually constitutes anti-Semitism is an obvious reference to accusations against the director in the past. Honestly, the topic comes out of nowhere and is a blatant attempt to clear his name within the confines of a film that otherwise has nothing to do with the subject. Much of the film's screed against the horrors of sensitivity and respect are in response to the director being temporarily banned from the Cannes Film Festival, an incident that he no doubt believes was political correctness gone mad, but was actually a reaction to the director exclaiming his support for the Nazis. He was almost certainly insincere, but people cannot judge what you feel deep down, only what you do. And so, perhaps because someone had the audacity to tell him not to shout support for the Nazis, he ramped up what he believes to be courageous, portraying the only black characters in the film as argumentative and childish. The audience generally unable to understand what they are saying because of a lack of subtitles, and having Joe using a couple of different words for black people that are no longer in proper use and considered slurs. I will not repeat them here for obvious reasons. Nymphomaniac, in part, is an apologia for the director's actions and beliefs. The allegedly good-natured character Seligman asks Joe not to use such words, and she, the avatar of Lars von Trier, says she is righteous for using slurs. What she calls political correctness is just what most people would call respect, but she claims it is worse than Hitler burning books. That is actually how she puts it, meaning how Lars von Trier is putting it. This is actually a common defense from people who just really want to scream the N-word and have some kind of philosophical or historical justification. Here is the truth. The Oxford English Dictionary online adds approximately 1,000 new words each year. We are not suffering a net loss to our language because the N-word is no longer commonly used in polite conversation. The film also serves as an apologist for pedophilia in one of Joe's most cringe-inducing speeches. Later, we see Joe in a sexual relationship with a 15-year-old girl, obviously played by an adult actress, and it is portrayed as romantic. Rape apologists love saying, "Well, in some countries," or 15 is close enough. Children cannot consent to a sexual relationship with an adult. There is no such thing as consensual sex with a minor, but Lars von Trier casts opposition to Joe's relationship in the same prudishness as one would cast a nun who objects to premarital sex between consenting adults. It is not the same thing, but the director sees no distinction. And that's dangerous. That's the danger of normalizing sex with minors. Let me be clear about this. Characters do bad things in film. It's all about how it is framed. In Nymphomaniac, Joe having sex with a 15-year-old girl is not framed as bad, it is framed as romantic. Nymphomaniac stumbles onto some truth from time to time, double standards about sex between men and women, for instance, but I don't know if the film actually serves women. The film gives us this supposedly titillating image of teenage girls roaming public transportation in search of men to seduce, but based on my conversations with women, what happens in real life is that both young girls and adult women search public transportation for safe seats to sit in without creepy men bothering them. The film proclaims that Joe's racism, her sympathy towards pedophiles, and her statutory rape of a 15-year-old girl is the new empathy, and that those opposed to her, like her debate sparring partner Seligman, are wrong. In fact, not just wrong, but monstrous. At the end of the film, Seligman tries to force himself on her in the middle of the night. The implication is that Joe's worldview, as the mouthpiece for the director, is more right than that of Seligman. Prior to the attempted rape, he espoused common, progressive, or even just good-natured positions. The revelation that he is a monster is the director's final comment that Seligman's good heart is vile and that Joe's views are correct. It's the narrative version of a straw man argument. In this case, the person preaching sensitivity and decency is literally the worst kind of person. In Nymphomaniac, Joe frequently says that her beliefs are the true form of empathy, and that Seligman's opposing views are invariably wrong. The movie hammers this in. Joe, according to the film, has real empathy in spite of the fact that most would consider her a racist and a statutory rapist. It's the kind of worldview that sees someone trying to do good and assuming it must be self-serving. That respect is insincere. The insensitive often think of themselves as courageous, so brave to harass and degrade people and hide it under the guise of a false honesty. The insensitive often think of compassionate people as weak because they can't fathom people behaving any other way. It must be exhausting being that cynical. A film, the director has said in the past, should be as irritating as a pebble in your shoe. And under those guidelines, those goals, one might say he succeeded, as Nymphomaniac is certainly that. Irritating. However, that is a poor method in which to value a work. Low-budget dreck and poorly constructed works are similarly irritating. Nymphomaniac is irritating, but it's not just irritating. It's actually kind of despicable, which I admit I was not entirely expecting, even knowing it was written and directed by a self-admitted manipulative provocateur. For the most part, Lars von Trier's 5-hour-long defense of himself against accusations of insensitivity has the opposite effect. I thought very highly of Dogville, Melancholia, some aspects of Antichrist, but after looking through his films with new eyes, I think I'm over Lars von Trier. Hi everyone, if you like what I do, consider clicking on the orange Patreon link below. That's how this show happens. It's also a way for you to request an episode, so check it out.